What's going on, everybody? Hey, this is Corey, and this is A God Amongst Men. So, I changed up things a little bit. I got my camera and my mic in a little bit of a different position. I like it a little bit better. So, what I want to talk about today is this. I really wanted to explain a little bit about the differences between ayahuasca and Iboga. Now, the big thing is most people, ayahuasca is the big story now. It's all the rage in a way when it comes to spiritual growth and development. And a lot of people went seeking ayahuasca after, I think a lot of big things had occurred. And I also think it's an easy conduit to go to. And I'll explain a little bit of what happened with me as to what led me to ayahuasca in the first place. And I think that's why it's such an easy conduit. I don't want to always blame everything on Joe Rogan. And I don't think it's blame. Him and Aubrey Marcus have done a tremendous job as far as, in a way, like waking up people to these different forms of entheogenic medicines and so forth. So, that's where I first, in a way, heard about it, so to speak. I believe, yeah. I'm just trying to make sure I have everything, facts straight as far as that's concerned, because, what happened with me was this, and I'll give you a little backstory. I went to war. I went to combat in Afghanistan, got blown up, watched a good friend of mine die as a result of an IED. As I went over to go and try to save him and a few other guys, I was subsequently blown up as well. I was about 15 feet away from a pretty big detonation. Threw me into a wall. I got rattled, woke up, or came to. Long story short, pretty sure I had traumatic brain injury, but it just didn't really come to grips until later on. Either way, just the amount of war that I went and I got into, the amount of combat that I faced, the amount of pressure, the amount of stress, everything that was going on in this pretty wild spot was enough to really throw off my hormone balance. And that's in part what I blame, or what I would attribute PTSD to being. I think it's one part physiological. I think it's one part spiritual. I think it's one part emotional. And then one part mental. Now, why I'm even going there is just to give you the precursor to what caused me to want to go down to Peru and partake in ayahuasca. Now, what happened was this, obviously after I came back, my body went through some pretty wild changes. You can't go from 1,000 miles per hour, what I like to joke around and say, like 200 miles an hour, and then put it in neutral and just coast. It'll blow the engine. That's essentially what we do to our soldiers and Marines and sailors, and coming back from these war zones is we rev them up super high, get them going, and then all of a sudden just bring them back and expect them to be perfectly fine, as though just yelling at someone and telling them to get in line is going to fix it. No, there's all those other areas that I talked about. So got thrown on psychotropic medication, absolutely hated it, pushed back against it. After it took me a little bit of time to do that, I played with some different other medications, absolutely hated those as well. Came to a conclusion in life. I was like, man, I don't want to be on this stuff anymore. Started using cannabis in order to remove myself off of those psychotropic medications. The cannabis did a tremendous job of being able to help wean me off, but at the same time, it is not. I talk about it. If you guys were to check out one of my videos, getting high, here's why. I talk a little bit about my cannabis use. I talk a little bit about my understanding of cannabis and how, a lot of people, especially in the mainstream today, try to play cannabis off as like this medicine, this beautiful thing that it needs to be consumed frequently and often and all this other stuff, and they don't put any blame into it for any of the shortcomings in their life, and that just isn't true. Cannabis is a lower level form of medicine. It's supposed to be used for a specific duration, and then after that it's supposed to be removed from your life, and a lot of people are literally just abusing the heck out of that I don't know if I want to call it a medicine. I think everything could be considered medicine if you really want to go down that route, if you want to like bend the semantics of things. But it's a tool that's supposed to be used sparingly and for a certain amount of time. What it did for me is it really started to open my eyes up. It really started to bend the illusion of this reality, especially the one that was pushed on us from a very early day of programming as children. I'm a product of the 80s. I was born in 1985. Everything was hunky-dory then. We were still coming and reeling from the whole identity of like the 1950s America, of the Stepford wife, and the man is this and the woman is that, even though I still do believe in some traditional roles when it comes to that, so don't get this twisted, because you're going to hear me talk about some of that stuff here. But what it comes down to is the cannabis did a tremendous job bending that, opening me up to a few different things, and I started to see the reality of our reality bend in front of us, almost like Neo bending the spoon in the Matrix. Anyway, cannabis did a tremendous job also pulling up all the emotional issues that I had just deep within inside me that I had buried just in my genome, in my body. I held it somewhere and I didn't let it go, and the cannabis really pulled it up and out. Now, why I'm telling you this is because cannabis is what led me to ayahuasca. Both very feminine, by the way. So cannabis has a female spirit, and the reason why cannabis is actually called marijuana, and that's a I want to say, well, it's obviously a Spanish term, marijuana. It means the whore Mary. And I think it's funny because that term came from people that started to kind of understand the spirit. Cannabis is a very alluring seductress, almost like ayahuasca in a way, but ayahuasca's I wouldn't really call her a whore. She's definitely very powerful, and she could be a cruel mistress for sure, but she's definitely she's quite a bit more refined than marijuana is. Like I said, marijuana on the totem pole of the frequencies when it comes to the archetype of the feminine is definitely a lot lower level. It's supposed to be a seductress. It's supposed to pull you into the weeds if you consume it too much, too frequently, and if you end up having a what's it called? A lustful relationship with her. So there's that. So as I started to use cannabis, I got called down to Peru. And it was crazy because as I was at my height, like the height of, having hallucinogenic experiences with cannabis due to eating it, which a lot of people they don't really know that. I don't know how many people, watch Joe Rogan are big into this stuff. But when you eat cannabis, it actually ends up metabolizing into a different chain of THC, and I think it even breaks down to something different. I forgot the actual chemical compound, but either way, as it's processed through the liver, it becomes a hallucinogen. And I've had some of my craziest hallucinations off of cannabis. So when I talk about it being a little bit lower level, it doesn't take away from the potency of the hallucinations. I had some of my craziest experiences just off of cannabis. So long story short, I ended up getting called down to Peru. And the reason why I got called down there too is because I had an intention. And my intention at the time was to be able to figure out a way to be able to holistically heal other veterans, other people with PTSD, without having to put them on a prescription medication. Because what was I feeling during my time frame of taking those prescription meds? Well, like a lot of people probably report, let me turn that gain down a little bit. Jeez. What a lot of people report is almost feeling like a zombie, right? And it's true. The reason why I am not a fan of synthetic anything. Now, I'm going to have to bite my words a little bit here, because I do think when people go through, or if people are having severe acute issues of depression, anxiety, thoughts of suicide, I think it is best to put them on something synthetic, but have a very short duration with that. Now, some people might say, hey man, that's messed up. But no, that's what's good about Western medicine, is for acute stuff. for getting things taken care of right then and there quickly, like putting a cast and setting a bone and all this other stuff, and some of our surgeries, awesome, ideal. But we are not good in Western society of healing, like true healing. We're really good at putting band-aids on things and fixing things up to get them to an operational state, but we are terrible with the long game. And that's where my mindset came in with all this, is like, okay, well, we're really, really good at sending these guys and girls, let's go with guys mostly. It's 95% of people that go over and fight a war are male. So bear with me if I'm not up to speed with your, political correct terms. It's mostly men. But let's talk about it in a general sense then, for if the gender thing is going to become a point of contention here, people, because PTSD can come from a lot of stuff. So for us, in the context of war, we're sending all these guys over to war, and we're really, really good at breaking them down and destroying them, but we're really, really terrible at saying, hey, when you come home, we have the solution for you. And we think that, and call me a conspiracy theorist here or whatever, but the majority of the VA, the Veterans Administration, what their solution is to throw pills at people, and keep them on those pills, and getting into the super gnarly form of capitalist ventures. That's really what people are looking to do with anything, not just with the VA. This is all forms of medicine in today's world. They don't give you the cure; they give you the thing that's going to keep you alive long enough so that you're going to be stuck on it and paying. That's not a fair system. So I go down to Peru with the intention of healing PTSD and being able to bring back the answers to other people. And that's seriously something that just launched me on an even deeper journey that we'll get into here in a little bit. It's some of the stuff that I absolutely love to talk about, to be honest with you, is just exploring consciousness. I've had some serious, gnarly things happen, and I've also had some amazingly beautiful things happen. And it's not in the context either of like these new agey people where, they're like, oh, everything is light and love. Like, I saw everything. I went to the depths of darkness. I would even say I went to the depths, to the expanse of the universe. And that's where we're going with ayahuasca. So what's the difference between ayahuasca and Iboga? The difference is this. So first and foremost, ayahuasca, you have to do a diet. You have to do a cleanse before you go and you ingest the DMT, right? So ayahuasca is a drinkable DMT with a MAOI inhibitor in it, right? So that so you can drink it and that your body won't metabolize it in your stomach. So the ayahuasca root is the one that has the DMT in it, and the chacruna has the MAOI inhibitor in it, which makes it so that you can have a drinkable version. And the cool part about that is, unlike the smokable version of DMT, the 5-MeO and all the other different kinds of esters or so forth, or molecules, this is going to last for anywhere from 3 to 8 hours, which is tremendous. Ayahuasca, like I said, first and foremost, is a feminine spirit. She is like what you would consider to be like the divine mother. And things that we have to take into consideration with ayahuasca, especially when it comes to the feminine, is the feminine is meant to destroy. Now, I know a lot of people are not going to like me saying this, but I don't care, because this is the truth of how the universe was created. We are a polarity. We are created in a polarity of a positive and a negative. You have to have a negative and you have to have a positive. Electrons are negatively charged particles that are drawn to a positive force known as a proton. That's the way things are. That's the way we exist. That's the way we interact with reality. You have to have a positive. You have to have a negative. Now, I understand that negative has a negative connotation to it, but let's look at it in the sense of polarity rather than looking at it in a pejorative. Okay? It's a necessity for life. It's the way it is. These are the answers that I learned from going through this stuff. You can't look at it as just a black and white. You have to understand it from the context of life, of reality, right? Of how this is all created. So, first and foremost, Ayahuasca is known as the Great Destroyer. She's known as the Vine of Death. She can be insanely motherly and nurturing. She can also be very alluring and seductive. She can also be one hell of a fucking bitch. And I've had an experience where that happened too, where yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily just the ayahuasca or if it was the container that I was in, but it's what I experienced, so that's all I can really go off of. Now, I'm going to talk to you primarily based off of my experience down in Peru, because I went down to Peru for my first one. I could get into the story of how this happened. I'm going to save that one because it's a pretty remarkable story, and it's going to take a long time. So just know that it was miraculous. When you start playing with these substances like ayahuasca and Iboga, even before you get down there to actually ingest the medicine, synchronicity is going to occur like nobody's business. You are already tapping into another dimension and you're being guided through that kind of stuff. It is absolutely insane, and that's what happened with me. So going back to ayahuasca is very feminine. It has a very motherly, nurturing component to it, if that is the medicine that you need to get from that. But also know that things are going to be destroyed in your life. And that's what I'll get into as we go towards the end of my experience with ayahuasca. So I get called down there and, drink ayahuasca. The second I got into the rainforest, mind you, the rainforest was actually absolutely tremendous. I started vomiting the second I got purging. The second I got into the rainforest, it was cleansing me because I didn't know about the diet before that, and I only dieted for maybe like 3 days when you're supposed to diet for like 2 weeks ahead of time. Holy crap! Like no salt, no sugars, no sex, nothing like that, and then all that good stuff. And I'm pretty sure like no drugs either. So anyway, I started purging the second I got into the rainforest. I could already feel the whole medicine starting to work. My first experience, well, first and foremost, so yeah, you diet. You have to diet for 2 weeks ahead of time. Very feminine. My first experience was insanely nurturing. Literally, as I was going into the hallucinations, I was like being rocked, almost like in a bassinet or hammock, right? So it brought me automatically back down to childhood, and it was like I was being mothered. And then the next thing I know, I'm waking up in the ground, right? I'm in the dirt, in the earth, and I have to like crawl my way up. And as I'm crawling my way up, I'm like seeing grubs and worms and stuff like that. And I'm kind of like, in a way, seeing like the evolution of life come out of the ground. I emerge from the ground, and all of a sudden, I look up to the sun, and the sun hits me, and then all of a sudden I start hallucinating and seeing like all these different animals and like all the apex predators, and I'm like looking at them, and I'm like kind of like connecting with them and communicating with them without saying words, and it was insane. I saw like bears and wolves and stags and leopards and I want to say dolphins, yeah, like different type of eagles. It was awesome, right? All these images were just like popping into my head, and then all of a sudden it like takes me up into space, and like I launch into space, and then the second I launch into space, I meet my soul. I meet my soul that was sitting in like an alien spacecraft, and I'm like, oh my god, my soul's an alien. This is freaking epic, right? And it's like this golden alien. And then all of a sudden the alien just descends down into my body, like just like a fucking meteor right into my solar plexus. And then I see it in my solar plexus as like this little fetus, and it's like round, it's like in a womb. And then all of a sudden it's like it ate like a magic mushroom out of Mario, and all of a sudden I feel it just go like wom, 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 and like grow into my body. Like, and then all of a sudden I start seeing through its eyes through my eyes, and I was like, man, this is fucking nuts. And then all of a sudden I like launch out into space, and I'm like seeing the expanse of the universe and like how far it reaches out and all this other stuff, and just all the different universes and galaxies and all sorts of different crazy stuff. And that was kind of about it for that one, aside from like being rocked. And then I had like a super gnarly auditory. I've never had an auditory hallucination, but like I was sitting there awake smoking a mapacho in the dark of this hut that we're in. You know, the shamans are like playing their music and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden they stopped singing. They took a little break, smoked a mapacho, and chilled out. And then all of a sudden, from the rainforest, I hear like this angelic thing just pierced. Like, it was so low, but it was like such a high frequency that it cut through everything. And it was just like right there in my left ear. I could hear it, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, it was perfect, feminine, just it was crazy. It was crazy. I had a lot of other experiences. We won't go into it. I don't want to make this too long, but needless to say, what it comes down to is this: ayahuasca does a tremendous job of showing you the expanse, everything that is out, right? Everything that has been created by consciousness, the different forms, the different realities, the different entities, all sorts of other things, right? And it's not to say that Iboga doesn't do this, but it's not the real true premise, and we're going to get there here in a little bit. So, also some other things that you're going to be able to really understand about ayahuasca is this: what ended up happening after I left. Now, this is one thing that people need to understand when doing these journeys. And this is, I can only speak from my experience. I don't know what everyone encounters, but this is one thing that I want to kind of like preface and get in people's minds, is that when you go and you do this stuff, that is the beginning of the journey, right? That's like the initiation into the journey. And what I mean by that is this: don't go down there. Don't go into any of these ceremonies expecting to get 100% of the answers right away. Go in there expecting to initiate the transformation of what you want to see in your life. Not what you want to see either, what you need in your life. Okay? So what I mean by that is this: when I went down there, you know, I was expecting to get some answers and all this other stuff. I did get some really cool stuff. I walked, honestly, top three experiences of my life for sure was going to Peru, drinking ayahuasca, having those ceremonies. Like, the beauty of it, it was just epic. It was epic. With that said, when I came back home, however, is when everything fell apart. I came back home. I closed down my business, which meant that I had no income. My PTSD and my anxiety and my depression were through the roof. I lost all my friends. I lost all my money. I had my cars repossessed. I lost my home. I became homeless. But the crazy part was, you know, there's a silver lining to this, is that it was everything that I needed in order to learn my own value. I needed to hit rock bottom in order for me to realize that my value was not extrinsic from myself. What do I mean by that? It meant that, you know, my upbringing, the entire time that I've been raised, I had been taught to believe that the keys to my happiness, the keys to my own identity, the keys to my own value, the keys to my own self-worth was from what I owned, what I had in my bank account, the house, the roof I had over my head, the clothes that I wore, all this other stuff. And I had to hit rock bottom and make a choice to live once I was there with nothing, with no friends, with the loss of identity in two regions, right? Of my business and of getting out of the military, of a life of being validated. Of being validated by the external. And I had to sit here and say, man, am I going to live? Can I choose right now to live my life and not take my life right now and let other people dictate my value? Can I live? Can I start off tomorrow saying, you know what? I choose to live my life because I choose to live my life. And I choose to live life tomorrow, starting tomorrow, with me as the center focus, with me as the most valuable character in my story. And I said yes to it. And it was not an easy road. It was not an easy road to rebuild. The next 2.5 years of my life, I was still practically homeless. I was not nearly in the shape that I'm in today. I was man, I was all over the place. I mean, I had to file bankruptcy. I had to get a new car. I had no money. I had to fight to get all this other stuff. I had to start going to school. I had to get jobs. I had to, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, it was crazy, all still while battling the depression and anxiety. So the ayahuasca did not cure my anxiety and depression. It didn't. But what it did cure was a broken foundation. Cured a broken foundation that my entire life rested upon, and it tore up my foundation from old, and it reset it with a new belief system, with a stronger foundation. And I believe it's a foundation that can weather any storm now. So, which now brings me to Iboga. Now, Iboga is a very, very masculine spirit. And a lot of people might not like hearing that because, you know, we're in a world today. Excuse me, let me move so that my butt cheek doesn't pass out here. We're in a world today that believes that any masculine trait or all masculinity is toxic and so forth. Imagine if you had the perfect father. That's what I consider Iboga to be. It's the ultimate tool for just guidance, where there's reports of other people that are able to go down and use this route, and they can ask direct questions, almost like a Google, and get the results. Now, I'm going to preface this one here because from what I've been able to understand, you know, going down and doing 2 ceremonies and having a lot of other people there's quite a few other people with different types of personalities, and then listening to other testimonials on the internet of people who have gone down and done Iboga. What I think with that is this. I believe that it's really personality dependent. So for me, for example, I possess a lot of alpha characteristics. Now, that's not me sitting here trying to say, guess what, I'm Mr. Alpha, blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying is I'm the type of person that is driven towards results. Like, could almost be maniacal to be driven towards results. And if I had a tool where if I could ask it a direct question and I could get the answer, I would be obsessed with it. Obsessed, right? It would be to the point, imagine where my mindset would be if I knew that there was a tool out there that could give you the answer to any question you ever asked. Where would my mind be? You know, where, if I knew that was capable, if I knew that was possible, I would go crazy in a way, because I wouldn't be able to trust any of my decisions after that. Does it make sense? So if Iboga affected me that way, I would probably be going down to Costa Rica or trying to get my hands on as much Iboga as possible, and I would probably not even exist in this reality anymore, because I'd just be sitting there like asking the oracle every flipping question possible. You know what I mean? But I think for people that are a little bit more passive, that have a little bit more of a like, I guess, beta traits in a way is the best way to say it. Those are the types of people that could probably ask the questions and just be like, yeah, okay, cool, that was great. All right, I got some answers. Cool, let's move on, right? But for me, that's not how Iboga works. So just going back to that. So what to expect with the Iboga is it's quite a bit different. Like I said, it's very masculine. And it's the right type of masculine that most people don't understand even exists. Most people are, like I said, brought up and raised to believe like the right masculine is this super strict and stern father that's going to discipline you for everything. And that's not how Iboga is whatsoever. Let me give you a case in point for what I experienced. So we'll get into that. Let me preface it a little bit better. So the difference between Iboga and ayahuasca is this. First and foremost, you don't have to do a diet, right? You don't have to cleanse 2 weeks beforehand. Iboga is going to work regardless. I would even say too, and I don't want to put my stamp of approval on this, but I'm pretty positive from what I've asked of different shamans and looked up in the research that in comparison to ayahuasca, where you can't take SSRIs or you really shouldn't be on any type of antidepressant or any real type of prescription drug when you use ayahuasca, because there's some serious forms of complication from that. With Iboga, you can. With Iboga, you can. So you don't have to diet, and you don't have to quit taking your medications a certain amount of time beforehand. So you're not going to have to withdraw. Like, that's what Iboga is kind of used for, is to quit these things and have zero withdrawal. So that's the cool part about that. Iboga, in comparison to, and so I've done quite a bit of other types of hallucinogens and entheogenic medicine. Like, I've done peyote, acid, mushrooms, ketamine, MDMA, cannabis, probably a few other different types of things thrown in there. Iboga could almost not even be considered, it's such a different experience than anything else that I almost don't even want to call it a hallucinogen. As weird as that sounds. No, you hallucinate and stuff, but it's so still locked into this reality. And it's just so much gentler, and it's a different filter. That's really the way to kind of go about doing that, I guess. So the big things that I want to talk about with that then is this. So the intention. So my intention before with ayahuasca was to go down there and cure my PTSD. And what ayahuasca did was instead, she cleansed all the shit out of my life. Like the bad people, bad relationships, bad thinking, like bad everything, bad foundation. Maybe it even comes down to, like, if we're to talk computer, maybe like firmware, hardware. I don't know. But Iboga is more like the software. When I went there, my first time, Chance, come here, buddy. The heck you doing, buddy? It was like a total software upgrade. My first experience when I sat there, the first time I ingested Iboga, I was literally like looking at like 3 screens. That's what my visualization was. And it was just a bar. It was almost like watching, it was a bar in the middle of a computer screen and just updating. Like, it was like a full software update. It was insane. The difference too was my intention as well. I went down to do Iboga in order to just strictly cure my anxiety and depression. It was my last ditch effort. Like, if I can't cure my anxiety and depression through this, like, I don't feel like I'm ever going to be able to. And it did. You can't be 100% rid of anxiety and depression. It is a part of life, but it ended up turning it into something that was manageable, something that I wasn't scared of any longer. And it made it so that, honestly, like, yeah, it wasn't a concern. It wasn't like these violent ups and downs. It was just like, hey, what a normal person should experience. You need to feel peaks and valleys, but they can't be Mount Everest every time, or the Mariana Trench, right? It needs to be like molehills, right? Our life, again, when I talk about polarity, we need these kinds of things in life. We need the ups and downs. That's a necessity, but it needs to be manageable. And that's what Iboga really helped out with doing. Now, like I said, and I talked about, the high is completely different from ayahuasca. First and foremost, we take it around a fire at night. It's a powder. And you kind of slowly feel it come on, and you're still cognitive. And you're almost like, should I be like waiting until this thing like really like takes me over? But the thing is, like, the second you really start feeling it and you hear things like slow down and become hypersensitive, that's when you're going to want to get up. You're going to want to call your shaman over and be like, all right, hey, it's time for me to go lay down. And you go lay down, cover your eyes. Oh man, it's all starting to come back. I did it a month ago. So I'm getting the chills from that. Ugh. So you go lay down. And the crazy part is, the first aspect of Iboga, every time I've noticed it, the second I take it and the second I lay down, the first 45 minutes or so of the actual hallucination, right? And I want to use that term brief, or loosely here, is it goes through your entire body and it cleanses like all your physical ailments, like the ones that are most pressing, the ones that are most required and needed. And I'm even going to go so far as to say, and go out on a limb and say, because this is what I experienced in my last ceremony, is it goes into the pockets of your body, that you're holding onto emotional traumas in, that are causing neurological, emotional, and physical imbalances, and it goes into it and it opens that up. And then it propagates it throughout the body to be healed. But then this is where it goes. This is what really happens, because one thing we don't understand is the relation between our subconscious and our conscious mind. And it's very hard for humans to tap into the subconscious because that's not part of our programming. We're conscious beings. Our subconscious is on autopilot. So it's very difficult to go and tap into those files. And that's what a lot of these, well, I would say specifically Iboga does. So Iboga, and this is, again, where I'm going with this. Ayahuasca is external, right? When you go and do ayahuasca, you're learning about the external, right? And that's kind of like the expanse of the universe and all this stuff. Iboga is all about the internal. Iboga is all about you and you alone and the things that you have to work on. So it's a very, very, very like personal journey. And you're working on the inside. You're working on the inside universe. You're working on the things that need to be cleaned up in your body and your emotional state and your physicality, all sorts of stuff. And it goes deep into the subconscious, and it pulls up the things in the subconscious, like the subconscious programmings that you have that are no longer serving you. So for instance, on this last one, the first thing that popped up was shame, right? It went into my hips. And I've had tight hips pretty much my whole life. And as of late, over the last few years, my right hip has just been like pinched up in my hip flexor. And it goes into my hip flexor and it like loosens it up. And then all of a sudden, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, I feel this wave of shame come on. And I'm like, that's shame. Like I identified it, right? And this is what Iboga is saying to me is it's like, hey, what is this? Like seriously, like this father, like this mentor figure is sitting there and it's like, hey, what is this? And I was like, oh, that's shame. And then it's like, oh, well, what is this doing here? I was like, oh, well, that's been here since I was 7 or 8 when, my father started making me play hockey against my will and then would yell at me every single time afterwards. He's like, oh, what else? Oh, it's probably from all this other stuff too from my childhood that I'm holding on to. It's like, oh, really? Huh. Well, hey, how is this serving you right now? I'm like, oh, well, it's not. I don't need it. Like, I don't want that. It's like, that's strange. You've been holding on to this for this long and you don't need it? You sure? It's like, yeah, sure. No, let's get rid of it. It's like, all right, cool. Let's get rid of it. And it's like gone. Right? So it's insane. Like, it's just funny to kind of do that. And then like the funny part is like the next part was guilt. Guilt came up. I was like, it's like, hey, you see what this is? It's like, yeah, that's guilt. It's like, oh, huh. What's this doing here? It's like, oh yeah, that's from like I could feel it coming up into my conscious mind. Oh, that's from this one time and this other time and this other time and all this other stuff. It's like, well, could you control that? Like, did you have any power over that? And it's like, no, I didn't. It's like, well, who taught you that? And it's like, oh man, like my parents, my upbringing, people in my upbringing. All right, well, hey, is this serving you right now? It's like, no. This is not serving me. That's holding me back from what I want to accomplish in life. Oh, cool. All right. So, do you need it? And like, it would go like, and I don't want to say it like this was like succinct where it would do that. It would go through. It's so funny because if you do this stuff, you'll feel it. Like it does the same themes over and over, but it does it almost like a roller coaster where like, and then after I kind of like had that epiphany of like getting rid of it, it would go into like some like cartoons and like some like funny images or whatever, and like it would play, it would like show me different things and like it would play around and stuff like that. And then another wave would come on. There we go. Another wave would come on, and then I'd be like, oh, I could feel that, right? Like I could feel that. Oh my God, that's what was the next one? I had like guilt, shame, and yeah, like fear, or I had like guilt, shame, and like what other people thought of me or something like that come up. And it's like, oh, where's that coming from? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, no kidding, crazy. And then like, here's the thing: if it doesn't feel like you really, really work through it, you'll work through it again, but in a different way, and you'll be like, all right, I got it, kind of deal, right? And then finally it'll click. So this is like, normally the ceremony starts at like 9 o'clock at night, where you ingest, and then, this is probably like 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, that all this stuff's going on. You don't even know what's going on. You're just sitting there, laying there, and all this stuff's going on. But everything is work the entire time. You're not sleeping. You're literally going through your subconscious, and it's pulling up the bad stuff from your subconscious into your conscious so you can clear it. And then when the sun comes up, the ceremony ends, but that's not when the Iboga quits. Iboga, so in comparison to the 3 to 8 hours that ayahuasca takes, where you can actually like go to sleep like right afterwards, Iboga does not stop for like another 24 hours after that. And a lot of you be sitting there like, oh my God, what's that mean? The cool part is you get to go, like the ceremony stops, the music cuts out. Holy crap, you should hear the music. It'll drive you nuts. But it's good because what it does is it keeps your conscious mind active so that your subconscious can come up. So it has some amazing effects. You end up going into your room. They usher you to your room because you literally you can't move. I can't say you can't move, but it's insanely difficult. Like your depth perception, all this other stuff, even your visual fields. Like it's almost like you're looking at reality through like a TV screen. It's pretty crazy. It's super cool. And then you go and you lay down in your room, and then for the next, my first one this time, it actually only stayed with me for like maybe another 6 hours. Because my first go around, I worked through a lot of good stuff. And I didn't really need to do too much work on that go around. It was kind of gentle. The second go around, we actually ended up going deeper. So I ended up probably holding on to the feeling of the Iboga for probably about like 12 hours after the ceremony this go around. But it's super cool because you usually get about 2 days after, like in between each ceremony, and that's plenty of time for you to really come down and learn a lot. Now, the entire time that you're in your room the next day, you're repeating almost like it's not done working. You're still, you might feel worse that day because it's literally your body cleansing that stuff out of you. It's good that it came up from the subconscious and went through the conscious mind, but there's still residual effects in the material world that need to kind of rid it. And that's what's going to go on now is your body is going to start to rid that connection to the emotion or that neural pathway, or it's crazy how this stuff works. It is phenomenal stuff. So don't go down there expecting like, okay, once the ceremony's over, like everything's going to feel great. Is it worth it? Is it worth going through all this stuff? 100%. I'm such an advocate for it now that like people will probably get annoyed because I'm sitting there listening to their issues. The people are telling me all this stuff and all this other stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, you need Iboga. Like you need to go down and do Iboga right now. Like, let's go. You need to book a flight down to Costa Rica. You need to call up Iboga Wellness Center. You need to go and do it. That's how phenomenal this medicine is. Honestly, this is true medicine. On the fact that more and more people are not open to it, or the fact that we're not allowed to really dispense it at the levels that it should be dispensed is beyond me. I get it though. If it was readily available then too, though, I also don't think it would be a journey. This is something that you should, just with ayahuasca, these are both, anytime you enter into the spirit world or go into journey or ceremony, you should be scared out of your mind. You should be so scared before going and doing it because that is the respect, right? Not to mention that there is a level of death that is occurring. You are going to kill off a portion of you, a part of you, a side of you, a shade or a perspective of you that's no longer serving you. And that side of you recognizes that it's going to die. It should be scary and sad. It's a roller coaster ride though, everybody. You're going to get on the roller coaster. You're going to go through the scary ride. You're going to have your heart beat quite a bit. You're going to think you're going to die. And then, boop, next thing you know, oh my God, what a rush. It's all over. Let's do it again. Seriously. So you need to have that respect for it. I just watched a video earlier of these silly kids. There's a video under Iboga of this kid who just decided to take Iboga with his buddy. And he had some terrible, terrible side effects, or not side effects, but like he got his ass handed to him because he didn't respect the process. He didn't respect the ritual. He didn't respect what it was meant for, and he got his ass whooped. It's the same thing with ayahuasca. If you don't do this stuff through shamans that are tried and true and have the right intentions, you're going to get hammered. If you're trying to take the cheap way out, right? If you're trying to order the stuff on the black market and do it in your room, it's not going to be the same effect as going through and setting in the right container and working with someone who's had the tradition or lineage passed down to them. A lot of people will be like, Corey, well, I don't have, you have the money. You have the ability. You have friends and family members that'll help you out. You have some way, shape, or form to be able to do it. Don't skimp on this stuff. I challenge every single one of you guys to go and do this and not skimp out. Honestly, don't be cheap about it. Don't try to do it by yourself. That's probably part of the reason why you're in the situation you're in. Let's face it. Do something different. Do something different than what you're accustomed to doing in life. Do things that are far more uncomfortable. A lot of people ask me, Corey, what if I poop myself, or what if I puke, or whatever? Okay. So what? I've sat in many a ceremony at this point in time. I've yet to see anyone poop themselves, to be honest with you. No one has pooped their pants. I know people that have gotten up and have to go poop and have said, hey, I got to poop. Or I need to use the bathroom, right? And they've gone and they've sat on the toilet and they're able to actually do that. But no one's pooped themselves during a ceremony. People have definitely purged big time. And every single person afterwards has felt tremendous. You're just getting rid of an emotional block in your body. You're getting rid of stuff that you don't need. You're getting rid of it. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. There's nothing to be embarrassed of. No one. When we all go through this, man, we all grow together. It's crazy. We all bond together. There's a tremendous connection. For the people who purge, it's like the next day we have a conversation about it, and they're like, oh my God, it felt so great. And we're like, oh my God, we're so proud of you, right? It's never one of those things of like, oh my God, you're such a loser or whatever. There's no judgment when it comes to that stuff. So with that said, that's the difference between ayahuasca and Iboga. I think I hit the wave tops. Big takeaways is that it depends on what you're looking to do. It depends on what you're looking for in life. And each and every time, if you make the decision to go and do something like this, find a reputable shaman, find a reputable place, spend the money and work with a shaman. Do it in the aspects of the tradition. I've done some outside of tradition before, and I'm telling you guys this from experience. Don't go outside of the tradition. Don't try to cheap out. Don't try to do it because it's more convenient. Go through the journey. Cool. Well, I'm happy with that. So any questions, comments, the like, you know what to do. If you want to hit me up directly, you can go on my Twitter or Instagram and you could DM me directly. And as always, one of the biggest things that I was able to take away from this stuff is the mindset and the philosophy that I was able to create from it. It was so funny because as I was on my last Iboga experience, Levi, one of the shamans, was sitting there and we're around the campfire and he's telling me about the Bwiti tradition, right? So the Bwiti are a tribe in Gabon, Africa, and Cameroon that, founded Iboga and through their experiences with all this have created the tradition. And Levi's sitting here and he's talking about the philosophy of the Bwiti. I've never heard of this before. And it's so funny because it was almost to the T what I wrote in my book in some aspects. But the central tenets of my book, Live Your Best Life in 30 Days, were like the central tenets of the Bwiti. And the reason why I want to bring that up is this. It's not that I copied anything, but they talk about Iboga and how they use Iboga in the Bwiti. And what they do is they take 3 separate people and they make them go in 3 different areas and they give them Iboga and they each of them the same question while they're separate. And then they say, all right, go out and have your experience and then come back. And then they keep them separated. And then they ask them the questions afterwards in order to find out what the truth is, right? And if all three of them come back with the same answer, then they determine that that's the truth. And when Levi starts telling me and all of us this story, right, about what the Bwiti believe, and I've never heard this before in my life. I've never researched it. I promise you. This was something that was a direct link of consciousness into my brain when I started writing my book. And Levi said that. I was like, no way. This is insane. So, not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that here. But what I am trying to say is if you want to read something that is universal truth, it's not me. I'm just the conduit for it. Take a look at my book. It's Live Your Best Life in 30 Days. It explains the understanding of what humans are, what we're supposed to be, and how we're supposed to be happy in this lifetime. Live Your Best Life in 30 Days. You can find it on Amazon. All right, everybody. Hey, listen, like I said, if you need to contact me, comment below. If you have any other questions, I'd love to hear some comments. I'd love to shoot some videos on your comments and questions. And if you have any stories that you want to share, just go ahead, DM me on either Twitter or Insta at Corey Capella, CoreyCapella. Peace. See ya.